Um, all right. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker, Michael Butts, DNRC Nursery Program Manager. Michael joined the Montana DNRC Seedling Nursery as Program Manager in 2022 after 10 years at the Greenbelt Native Plant Center, the nation's largest municipal native plant nursery. Michael has focused most of his recent career in native seed production and restoration ecology, growing eco-regional seed for the Mid-Atlantic Regional Seed Bank and launching the Montana Native Seed Network in 2022. Prior to his time in the native plant nursery industry, Michael worked for the botany department of the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., where he expanded his passion for plant conservation. Tonight, Michael will present the nursery's newly expanded operations as the eco-regional native seed production hub for the Montana Native Seed Network. So welcome, Michael. Thank you so much for joining us.
All right. Well, thanks, Alex, for that introduction, and thank you everybody online for joining this evening. Also, thanking all the folks at the Native Plant Society for the opportunity to present. And I'm pleased to be presenting the Montana Native Seed Network and how the seed produced through the network will be an essential resource for all of us in our work to restore and enhance Montana's ecosystems. So this will be a similar presentation to the one I gave at the Native Plant Society's Conservation Conference in Bozeman last April. But now that we have completed our first year of foundation seed production, I have a lot of updates from the 2024 season. So as Alex mentioned, I joined the DNRC Nursery as program manager about 2.5 years ago. And coming from a native seed production background, I immediately recognized the amazing potential that the nursery has to become a seed production hub for the entire region. So we have over 60 acres that were formerly bare root tree seedling fields, and we're set up perfectly with that infrastructure, with irrigation and past agricultural use with those fields to be easily transitioned into native seed production. So tonight I'll go over how we are transforming the acreage into a native seed production hub for the network. But first, a little bit about the nursery. For those of you who might not be familiar, we are a DNRC facility and part of the Forestry and Trust Lands Division. We operate as a proprietary fund, so we do not receive an annual state budget. So thus the seed network will rely heavily on grant funding to in its initial years. The nursery was established in 1927 at the University of Montana and moved to its current location in 1952. So we're about to celebrate our 98th year. In 2025 will be our 98th year in operation. So since its inception, the nursery's focus has been providing site-specific, genetically appropriate native tree and shrub seedlings, both containerized and bare root, for conservation projects throughout Montana. But of course, tonight for this presentation, I'll be focusing on an entirely new program at the nursery, which is the development of native seed increase production. And before we get into that, I just want to note our annual sale for tree seedling sale, tree and shrubs, begins spring 2025 begins on January 20th. And for those of you who want to have a little tutorial about how to order and selecting appropriate species, Ashley Matson, our operations specialist, is holding a webinar on January 13th, 1 week prior to the sale date. And if you want more information ahead of time, checking out our inventory and what will be available, just navigate to our website, which I have listed on the screen here. You also can navigate to the new online ordering portal, which was just is going to be launched for the first time this year. Before, we were doing all of our orders by hand. So we're getting into the 21st century here with an online ordering system, and you can access that through the nursery website as well. And delivery and pickup usually begins about the second week of April, depending on the weather. And also on our website, you can find a lot more resources, such as our catalog and planting guides. So to get into the Montana Native Seed Network, I identified 5 main talking points for tonight. First, I'll identify or define the network, and also some of the cooperating partners, funding partners. We'll get into the national level of creating eco-regional hubs for the national seed strategy. And then focusing in on the DNRC nursery as the production hub of producing foundation seed. I'll go into detail about the difference between foundation and bulk seed coming up. And then also in this section, I'll give the updates from the 2024 season. And then the last 2 sections, I'll get into some seed-based restoration, species lists using Montana Native Seed Network's mixes, best practices for seed-based restoration, and then how seed-based restoration can complement post-wildfire reforestation. I'd like to start off by saying that the Montana Native Seed Network is for all Montanans. Producing this eco-type seed will give future generations just the beauty and all of our natural environments, enhancing that for generations to come. So, you know, it's not just for practicing professional, it's for citizen scientists, naturalists, and everyone, and amateur botanists. And the mission of the network, as part of the National Seed Strategy, the Montana Native Seed Network brings together public and private conservation practitioners that are working in the native seed industry. Through partnerships, genetically rich ecotype seed is derived from wild plant populations and produced on a large scale at the DNRC Seedling Nursery in Missoula. This seed is accessible to all partners to restore and enhance ecosystems throughout the region. And the network is comprised of 2 principal partners, the Montana DNRC and the Missoula Conservation District. So we entered into a cooperative agreement with the Conservation District in 2022. So these partners are providing the land and employment for seed production, also some startup costs in that initial phase, and of course, long-term network development. And as part of the agreement signed between the 2 partners, 10% of all local ecotype seed produced through the network will be designated for restoration operations within Missoula County. And then, you know, as the name suggests, there's a large network of cooperating and funding partners for production, distribution, and funding. So you can see here on the slide, we have everybody represented from the private sector, commercial seed growers, to the federal side of things, and everybody in between, nonprofit, state, and county. So the 2 primary funding partners are the Forest Service Region 1 and the Bureau of Land Management. So we have grants and cooperative agreements signed with both the Forest Service and BLM for the next 5 years to really bolster our efforts of foundation seed and bulk seed. So bulk seed, I'll get into that in a little bit. That's going to come in phase 3. So I'm going to be using some grant funds to incentivize the commercial seed growers to enter into contracts to grow out and really create large scale mixes for landscape level restoration. So all of these cooperating partners are helping with the entire spectrum of seed production cycle, and that starts with wild seed collection and then going through the foundation of bulk seed production, and then ultimately out to seed sales and distribution. So the funding partners are helping with some of these harvesting equipment and seed cleaning equipment at the nursery for the small scale foundation seed. Also working with the Montana Seed Growers Association and the Department of Agriculture for properly certifying, bagging, testing, and labeling all of the seed once we get to that bulk level. Also outreach to partners in the education sector. So we want to have land available here for research and things like common garden studies, and then of course restoration operations. And then, one of the main goals for the network is developing Montana's native plant material supply chain, not just seed, but live plant material, using ecotype seed collected and banked by the network. So the DNRC Nursery has a seed bank that we are actively banking wild population collections to start this supply chain, and also ensuring that native plant materials on the commercial market are ecotypic, which means they are derived from wild collected populations. So the network is promoting ecotypic native seed as an essential natural resource. I like to think that native seed is as valuable as our other natural resources like water, timber, air, all of that. So I think that's a little bit of a paradigm shift for some folks to think of native seed as a natural resource. And then, as I mentioned, the private sector native plant nurseries will be able to propagate and provide ecotypic liner material to retail nurseries throughout Western Montana. And a partner that is working really diligently in this regard is Heidi Fleury at the Western Montana Conservation Commission. So she has her own grant money where she is incentivizing or trying to come up with a program to for native plant nurseries in the private sector to use the ecotypic seed from the seed network to really bolster that native plant material supply chain and feed into the retail sector. And again, commercial seed growers will be contracted to grow large scale what I call bulk ecotype seed that is derived from the foundation seed produced at the DNRC nursery. And as I mentioned, grant funds will bolster the supply chain and incentivize growers. All right, to zoom out onto a national level, we can see what is needed to build the native plant material supply chain nationally. And this is just a quote here from the National Seed Strategy that tens of millions of pounds of native ecotype seed are needed annually to meet the conservation and restoration demand nationally. I also have a reference a report here on the right side of the screen. The National Academies of Sciences produced a report in 2023, an assessment of native seed needs and the capacity for their supply, and really has some good data in there. And you can find that nationalacademies.org. So the Montana Native Seed Network is one of many partnerships, state and regional partnerships that are forming kind of from the grassroots level, and then feeding into this national seed strategy of the BLM. So some established networks represented here on the screen. We have the Great Basin Native Plant Project, Colorado Plateau Native Plant Program, the Mojave Desert Native Plant Program, and then now we can add the Montana Native Seed Network to this list. I have some others listed on the bottom of the screen, and as Alex mentioned, I was the seed producer for the Mid-Atlantic Regional Seed Bank before moving out to Montana. And then the private sector is just critical for developing this supply chain and really getting those quantities of seed to that level that we need. So the companies and organizations I have listed on the screen, I've been in contact with, and they're excited to be part of the network. The National Seed Strategy has identified 70 forbs, wildflowers, and 41 grass species to be increased in our, in the Northern Rockies ecoregion. And I do have some updates further along in the talk about Eastern Montana and how we're going to develop ecotype seed for Eastern Montana. And then just a little bit more about the National Seed Strategy. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law 2022 through 26 allocated $200 million to be available to establish and implement a national revegetation effort on federal and non-federal land, including to implement the National Seed Strategy for rehabilitation and restoration. And 2020 was the first 5 years of the National Seed Strategy, and so 2025 will be 10 years. So zooming into our region, and the bullseye on the map is Missoula, and where wild populations are currently being collected and banked. In a little bit, I'll talk about how we're searching and looking for seed collectors throughout the whole state. So we're hoping to find more, especially toward the northwest and southwest, but in the east, we have a plan for the east, and I'll get to that. So right now, our level 3 ecoregions that we've collected seed from and banked are from the Northern Rockies, the Idaho Batholith, the Middle Rockies, Canadian Rockies, and a little bit from the Northwestern Glaciated Plains. So about 100-mile radius that we have seed banked currently. And then, expanding that radius out a little bit more, we can get to all of those primary ecoregions of the state. So here is that breakdown I mentioned before, the difference between foundation seed and bulk seed. So on the left, small scale production is known as foundation seed or generation 0. And that's propagated wild collected seed. Each plot comprised of 3 to 5 distinct wild populations outcrossing in the field to produce genetically rich ecotype seed. So those are plots up to 3,000 square feet. We use a combination of hand and mechanized harvesting. And those production fields are located here at the DNRC Nursery in Missoula. And those quantities produced from this small scale are appropriate for very small restoration projects. We're not talking landscape level, just not at that scale that we're seeing with the bulk seed, which is on the right side, which is generation 1 seed. So those fields are direct sown from the foundation seed, and those are large plots, sometimes multiple acres per species. And this is where a lot more mechanized harvesting and seed cleaning comes in. Also the private sector contract growing. And so at that point, we'll be able to have more diverse regional habitat mixes available for landscape level restoration projects. And I mentioned earlier the seed production cycle. So we have 2 kind of visuals here of the seed production cycle, starting from the wild seed collection through propagation and field cultivation, harvesting, seed cleaning, banking and warehousing, and then ultimately out to the restoration projects. And starting with wild seed collection on the left, you can see our seed program coordinator, Kylie Brown, out there, I think in Elk Meadow somewhere in the Bitterroot, collecting, I think that's a species of Rudbeckia occidentalis. And so it doesn't really match up with that arrow because that's a species of Asclepias in the greenhouse. But just wanted to show how the wild seed collections are propagated for the foundation seed in plugs in the greenhouse. For our contract seed collectors who are doing some larger collections, you can have little tools. This gentleman on the bottom left has a small brush harvester. Of course, you're making sure you're getting a monoculture, not contaminating with other species when you're out there seed collecting. This is our seed collection guidelines for 2024. We'll have a 2025 updated guidelines to send out to folks who are interested. We're looking for contract seed collectors. We have grant money to pay for contract seed collectors. It's essential that our seed bank is constantly replenished with as much diversity as possible. Even if we don't have plans in the future or immediate years for production, we would like to bank as many species as possible. So please enter it in the chat or contact me if you would like to become a 2025 contract seed collector. So field cultivation, after you propagate those plugs in the greenhouse and we're installing them into the foundation fields, you can see some some pictures here of our methods. We use weed fabric almost exclusively for our smaller foundation seed plots. In the middle, top middle, you can see we use a tulip drill to drill those holes for the plugs. We don't use, I'm trying to be 100% organic. So, you know, some integrated pest management, if we have any kind of outbreaks. Unfortunately, our nemesis is bindweed, which I'm sure everybody is aware of. So picture in the top left is bindweed coming up through the weed fabric. That weed fabric was down for a year and a half, and the bindweed is still thriving under there. So our strategy with any fields that have bindweed, we will plant grass species into those so we can use a broadleaf herbicide to treat that bindweed, because that's really the only way to get on top of it. And I don't know if we'll ever eradicate it, but that's our method. We have a butane torch and an extirpator. The butane torch we use to burn the holes in the weed fabric so that the fabric doesn't fray. So that's a handy tool that we use. And a lot of hand pulling. That's why I have that extirpator on there. So after, when we're ready to harvest, different methods of harvesting, you can go from hand clipping with those pruners in the bottom, also a reverse leaf blower. So we have modified leaf vacuums. Instead of a leaf blower, it's vacuuming up leaves, and we take out the blades in there so that we're not chopping up the seed. And that's great for any species that have pappus. As you get larger production, you need more mechanized equipment, similar to what you'd find in the agricultural industry. So our contract commercial growers will be using combines and you know, typical farming harvesting equipment. There are specialized small plot combines, such as the one on the bottom right. I'm hoping to get a winter Steiger small plot combine. I've laid out all of our foundation rows in 5-foot widths to accommodate a small plot combine. And that saves a lot of time on the back end, because you're kind of pre-processing that seed and cleaning it a bit as it's being harvested. Of course, we want to maintain, we're making sure that we're capturing the as much genetic diversity as possible. So harvesting, that means harvesting throughout the entire maturation window. Sometimes native species, as you all know, can be going to seed for multiple months. So we don't want to lose that early seed, and we don't want to lose that late seed. So we want to make sure, and that goes through the whole cycle, even into seed cleaning. You want to make sure that you're using the right screen and the right airflow so that you're not selecting for any certain size seed. And again, back to that, those genetics, having multiple wild populations represented in a foundation seed plot, working with some researchers at the university, doing seed transfer zones. I'm taking in as much information as I can to choose which populations are most appropriate to outcross, because you know, working with so many different varying elevations and habitat types here. So if there isn't that data out there, we're going ahead and with certain species choosing actually low, high elevation, mid elevation, especially some of these more common species like yarrow. So if we have a high and low crossing, ultimately when it goes out to a restoration site, some of that genetic plasticity will be represented wherever that seed is broadcast. And then you know, brush harvesters are also on an ATV are pretty nice for small foundation size plots. And then after harvesting, the material has to be properly dried down before it can be extracted or cleaned. So on the bottom right is collections being dried down, and just making sure that humidity level is low, so you don't have mold issues. And also predation issues can be an issue with storage. any kind of storage, whether it's pre-cleaning or after bagging. So sometimes I'll have our seed lots elevated and bagged in a way so that rodents can't get in there. Also on the screen, varying types of seed cleaning machines there's so many different ways to clean seed in different machines. It's kind of like I always say it's like Willy Wonka with and you can be really innovative about your approach to seed cleaning. So my go-to are brush machines and clippers, but some people do use things like gravity tables or indent cylinder machines. But basically 90% of what we clean here, the species, go through a brush machine first and then into a clipper, and a clipper uses screens and air to separate the seed from the chaff. And then after seed cleaning, we get into banking and warehousing. So here we have a Montana State Seed Lab Pure Live seed analysis of blue bunch wheatgrass from last year, and all seed lots need to be tested for viability. And when anybody's buying seed, they're buying pure live seed, and they're not buying chaff, and they're not buying dead seed. So working with the seed lab is going to be a great partnership going forward. And after it's bagged, tested, and labeled, we'll store it in a temperature and humidity controlled granary or a seed bank, similar to what you see on the top right. I'm actually building one right now on site, retrofitting an old walk-in cooler here. But you can kind of see the size of the foundation seed bags in the very far end of that top right photo. And then on the right side, on those shelves there, those envelopes are the size of the wild populations. And then ultimately feeding into the national seed strategy, as we get into that bulk production, we'll have those giant 50-pound bag, either mixes or straight species. Definitely want to have the availability to customize for site-specific projects as well. And a look at the phases. Phase 1 was 2022 and 23, and we accomplished all those goals, getting the fields prepped. And now we're into phase 2, 2024 through 26, which is really focusing on that foundation seed and getting enough foundation seed to enter into contracts with the bulk sector, the private sector, for bulk seed production. And that's where we're going into phase 3. And then some photos of phase 1, that highlighted field there. Triangular field is where we started and prepared that last year, put deer fencing up and weed fabric. Luckily, we did have the irrigation risers already ready to go from those former bare root fields. So here's some photos from last year and a bird's eye view from last year. And then phase 2, these are the 3 fields that are currently prepped. It's about 10 acres ready to go. We've installed 6 acres. So we have another 4 or 5 planned for next year. And the remaining acreage, so the remaining 50 or so acres will be going through soil remediation, and we have agreements with or land use license with local hay farmers, just getting that soil back to health. And we'll do some medium scale, I wouldn't say it's bulk, but medium scale grass production in these larger acreage in the coming years. And 2024, we installed 12 species. These are our first 12. And so don't go through this too quick. Name them off here. We have yarrow, heartleaf arnica, balsam root, smooth blue aster, blanket flower, silky lupin, Alberta beard tongue, Missouri goldenrod, showy milkweed, showy fleabane, Canada goldenrod, and wild bergamot. And the reason we chose these is I sent out a survey back in 2020, early 2023 to about 35 network partners about asking what their highest demand for urban grass species were. And these 12 came up as the top. So that's why we started with them. They're what I call workhorse keystone species. And, you can go into a variety of habitats. So they're pretty critical to have in a basic seed mix. So now some photos from this year. This is taken early summer after we installed the first several species. And then a little later in the summer. So we have the yarrow and blanket flower in full flower there. Some nice close-ups. I'll have to credit Ashley Matson, our operations specialist, for all of these beautiful photos. She's been a documentarian throughout the season and really capturing every step of the process. Here's our crew unloading plugs that were contract grown by Great Bear Native Plants in Hamilton, Montana. So we're under contract with Great Bear for using the wild population seed to propagate at their facility, and then picking up those plugs and using them to install into the foundations fields. And they really know their stuff. This is their bread and butter, these species. So it's been great working with them and continuing that partnership. We do grow quite a bit of our own material for the seed increase program here, but our greenhouses are really dedicated to our tree and shrub seedling production. So we're kind of at capacity with that. So it's been really great to form these partnerships with the private sector. Another photo of some fall flowering goldenrod. I think this is Canada goldenrod, and some smooth blue aster in the background. Again, more photos from this year. So I popped this photo in here because it really represents the crazy genetics that you'll get from these different populations. This blanket flower head looks like a diploid or quadruploid fused head. And it's pretty cool. If you look down the rows, we planted the distinct wild populations in right next to each other in weed fabric rows. So sometimes you can look down and see the distinct morphological differences between the populations. Also, of course, it's a haven for pollinators. So we got some great photographs of the diversity of pollinators. It's been good working with Mary Rose Coleman at the Department of Ecology Extension in Missoula. She's an excellent entomologist, and she's excited about the potential for projects here on the foundation fields. And then you go, of course, after flowering, the whole point is going to seed. So here's a couple photographs of smooth blue aster on the left and blanket flower on the right going to seed. And so the blanket flower was mostly harvested by hand this year. Eventually, we'll try some more mechanized equipment with that, but it does have such a long maturation window. We really want to make sure we capture all of those early to late maturing seed. And we had, I think, 7 volunteer events, planting events this year, organized by the Missoula Conservation District, our principal partner. So we had a bunch of people out. It just got more and more popular. So looking forward to next year. If you guys want to sign up for these volunteer events, please contact Brian Vogt at the Missoula Conservation District. His email is here on the slide. So for 2025, we're going to have not only planting volunteer events, but harvesting and seed cleaning. Here's some more harvesting. Kylie Brown, our seed program coordinator, is harvesting smooth blue aster on the right, and then she's drying it down on the left on giant tarps. And we fabricated a giant screening table to pre-process the material before it goes through any of our seed cleaning machines. So you can see on the bottom left, we have taking that smooth blaster large stem material and screening it across the table to get that pappus with the seed off of there, and that's just really helpful for the next step, which is the brush machine. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to feed that brush machine all of that large stem material. Of course, it is a dirty process, a really dusty process. So wearing those respirators throughout the whole seed cleaning process is highly recommended. So here's that brush machine I was talking about. Kylie is feeding that brush machine fireweed. So we had a large wild population collection of fireweed, and the brush machine has mantle inside that has screens. You choose the right mantle according to the size of the seed you're processing. And fireweed has I think it's something like 11.8 million seeds per pound. So it's like almost like dust. And then just the brush machine does a great job of removing that pappus. And then you would take that material and put it on a clipper to finish it up. And then on the far right there, we have our first bag of foundation seed, and that's about 5 pounds of yarrow, and that can go a long way. Yarrow has about 2.7 million seeds per pound. So we'd only need a few ounces of that bag to hand over to the private sector for bulk production. All right, planning for 2025, we already have our species selected, and 3 of them have wild populations have already gone to Great Bear for production so that they can start stratification and treatment, pre-treatment. So we're going to be putting in hairy golden aster, curly cup gumweed, silverleaf phacelia, prairie smoke, poker alum root, and nettleleaf giant hyssop. And of course, you got to have grasses in your mix, the backbone of a mix. And I like to have almost 50 to 60% of a mix as grass species. So we're bringing in more and more grasses next year. We'll most of these ones on the screen we'll bring into production, and then over the coming years, I think I have 11 listed over here. We'll have all of those in production by 2027. So in addition to our ecotype seed production, we have entered into contracts for specific grow outs with National Forests and National Park Service. So the Helena Lewis and Clark National Forest was the first Forest Service partner on board, and we put 3 distinct wild population collections that they sent to us from Helena Lewis and Clark into production. So those are those 3 for that grow outs for them, and then Yellowstone has 6 grow outs going. We put into production the first 3 listed there, the evening primrose, fringe sage, and basin wild rye this year. And then 2025 they've selected tufted hairgrass, Idaho fescue, and Missouri goldenrod. So I don't know if you guys quick to notice that both Helena Lewis and Clark and Yellowstone have Missouri goldenrod they've chosen to amplify. So just to make sure that those genetics are staying isolated, we're gonna have those as far away as possible with hedgerows in between. Of course, pollinators can fly quite a distance, so it's not 100%, but just making sure that those isolation distances are accounted for like species. And phase 3, going into 2026 and beyond, is all about that bulk seed production. So, larger scale at the nursery, but mainly with the contract growing with the private sector. Also, my dream would be to have a actual seed extractory on site at a new facility. Our old Quonset hut is not appropriate for the scale that we're looking into, but as of right now, it's just a dream. But having that seed extractory somewhere around there would be the plan. And then funding, having those principal funding partners is critical, just with all the infrastructure that's going into it, with the deer fencing and employment, paying for seasonal employment, and the DNRC Nursery as a proprietary fund, we are providing a match, not a full match, but we do have some seasonal employment contributing to the seed program as well. And then timeline, I can get you this resource just to summarize what I've gone through is when seed mixes will be commercially available, and when small amounts will be available into 2026. All right, last couple sections here, doing pretty good on time, I think. So getting into a seed-based restoration. Of course, seed-based restoration can be used for practically anything. We have a good list here of some of the applications. Just like to point out stream erosion mitigation restoration. That's what the main goal is for Yellowstone National Park. Why they're entering into a contract with us is, I think we all remember the 2022 floods they had, and there's just so much roadside seeding that needs to happen in Yellowstone. And these are some potential mixes. This is not set in stone. I think I mentioned earlier, we want to customize as much as possible. So, if a restoration practitioner comes to us with some data about their site habitat, and we can really hone in on what would be the most appropriate species for that habitat. But we will have some generic mixes available. So I just listed the Western Montana pollinator mix because that will most likely be the one that comes online most or in the near term, because those are the species we put into production this year. So all of those will go into a pollinator mix. Of course, I always like to have grasses in a pollinator mix as well, not just forbs. Another credit to Ashley for that photo in the back. We love seeing seed art. It's pretty spectacular. This is a great resource if anybody's doing their own seeding. I got this seed mix calculator from the Xerces Society website. So you can input all of the necessary information in there, percent of species, the market price per species, how many acres you want to seed, and then the calculator will give you a nifty little calculation on how much it'll cost and how many pounds or ounces or whatever per species that you'll need. So now to get into our plans for Eastern Montana, the Great Plains, Northern Great Plains, and the Prairie out east. Our partner at the BLM, Wendy Vellman, who spoke in October, has really amped up her efforts for wild population collection, seed collection, and also partnering with South Dakota State University with some, I believe, IRA, Inflation Reduction Act money to really scale up Eastern Montana ecotype seed production. And we're still in early talks about that, but we want to dedicate some portion of the acreage at the nursery for Eastern Montana ecotype. A good example of some Eastern Montana mixes, what could go out there. And then prepping your site, we're obviously working in a wide variety of topography and terrain in Montana. So sometimes you won't be able to get in with, this is a better slide to represent that. A native seed drill is really the way to go. And if you have wide open areas and large landscapes in the prairie out east, you want to use a Truax or native Great Plains native seed drill. But obviously, if you're not, if your site is forested or has obstructions, you're going to want to use one of these other methods, whether it's hand broadcasting or hydro seeding with a tackifier. And then cover cropping, we're trying to develop, actually had a conversation today about it, which native species would be the best cover crops, as opposed to the traditional agricultural cover crops. Because introducing agricultural cover crops into a natural system is really not the best idea. Some of them persist in the landscape for far too long, and can outcompete your natives. So we're looking into some clovers and native vetches. Also, a lot of the grasses are good for covers. So I'm gonna skip over that. And then finally, our last section here, using seed-based restoration to complement post-wildfire reforestation. Borrowed this table from the Bureau of Land Management. I think, yeah, it's for 2020. So Montana had a total of 369,000 acres burned in 2020. So we all know the wildfire intensity and frequency is increasing. So using a native seed mix can help with slope stabilization, natural succession, invasive control. And I'm working with the DNRC fire crews to develop fire-wise seed mixes to use post-wildfire and to really get that establishment going and keep out the invasives, and keep that erosion down. And I think that's all I have. So thanks, everybody, and I think we have plenty of time for questions.
Thanks so much, Michael. Yeah, thank you so much. And I want to definitely encourage people to enter into the chat your questions. And we have one from Nathan Phillips. Do you do any work with massed reforestation, a reforestation / tech firm out of Seattle that does work in Montana?
Yes, we have worked with them, partnered with them, mostly on our seedling production side of things. I know they had a recent large reforestation project in Montana that they've been promoting. Sheep Creek is its name. And I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of seedlings that they planted there, but yeah, they have their eyes set on big things. I know they bought up a couple nurseries out west. They bought up Cal Forest and Silva Seed. So yeah, they're becoming a major player, especially in the reforestation side of things. I don't think they've branched out into the native seed production side of things yet.
Beth is asking how big your staff is in Missoula.
We have 7 full-time staff. And that goes down to just the full-time occasionally, but then we bring on sometimes up to 5 seasonals, whether they're 6-month seasonals or 90-day short-term seasonals. Right now is our starting of our really busy time. From November through June is the seedling greenhouse production busiest time. So we do have 5 seasonals on right now to do our pull and wrap season, which is pulling our 1.1 million seedlings out of our styroblock containers for winter storage.
And then Ed was asking what the grass species was in the last slide.
Oh yeah, I should probably update that. That's from my production fields out east. That's Aragrastis spectabilis, purple love grass. Not native here. Sorry.
It's pretty though.
Mhm.
And then Patrick is asking if you're doing any new woody plant seed collections.
Yeah, we have, I think, 11 new species that are going to be on the sale coming up on January 20th at Some that come to mind are mock orange. I think we've done mock orange in the past. It's just been several years since we've done it. Um, we have some spireas. I mean, those are, it's called subshrub, semi-woody. Let's see. Yeah, a lot more shrub. We're doing a lot more shrubs than we used to. We
And I
just
imagine,
do like to increase the diversity every year.
is the seed collection for like shrubby or woody plants more challenging?
Um, I'd say it's about the same. I mean,
Okay.
it depends on the species, but we are looking to, if you do want to become a contract seed collector, for example, we won't deny shrubs species. We just have to maybe have a conversation about which species, but
Mm.
there has been some conversations about establishing hedgerows of shrubs here on the nursery that are, high demand shrubs that maybe are hard to find natural populations of. So, that I would definitely consider.
Mm. Um, Barbara says, great presentation. Thank you. I toured the fields early last summer, so your photos of the season's growth were nice to see. Maybe I missed it, but do you anticipate being able to provide seed mixes on a small scale to the public for their own use in the future?
We will. Yep. It's just getting enough diversity, enough quantities available, going through the whole certification, bagging, testing, labeling process, to have a nice, well-rounded mix available. So it's coming soon. It's a process. I would
It
say stay tuned, because Ashley, our operations specialist, is always updating the website for the seed program. And so, the latest news will be on our website.
okay. And our Anthony's asking, are there any support programs to help with the startup for Generation Zero plantings?
Support programs. I'll have to say we have so much support. It's been great. Our principal partner, the Conservation District, organized all of our volunteer events. Without that, and we installed 30,000 plugs in 2024, which was a pretty awesome feat to accomplish. And without those volunteer events, that wouldn't have been able to get done. So that and uh, of course, the funding partners and just all of the great practitioners that are already doing all this great work. It's like they're really dialed in and interested in developing the network together.
Mm, that's great to hear. Um, and Denise is asking, do your plans include central Montana and southwest Montana?
Oh yes, yeah. In Montana, plants don't abide by state lines. So, if we have partners that are in eastern Idaho and northern Wyoming, definitely. I don't have any partners yet in Canada, but I kind of divided the state east and west. So east of the divide, west of the divide. Right now, we really only have um, that radius around Missoula banked. So that's why we are looking for more central, southwest, and northwest. And then, of course, I mentioned our plans for the east.
Mm. Mm. Um, oh, Leslie has a good question. Do you offer recommendations for eradication of invasives like knapweed and alyssum?
Uh,
Develop those
um,
cover crops, please.
yeah, cover crop. I mean, it's really getting after them year after year. And if you don't want to use herbicide treatment, it's pulling and I mean, I live by that weed fabric. That's just what I've always done. I haven't ever gotten to the scale where the commercial sector is, where they're direct seeding and then they're having to use a lot of herbicides. So pre-emergence and throughout the whole season using different herbicides.
Yeah.
Yeah. So our worst one right now is the bindweed.
Yeah, I feel you there.
I've
Seems like the
never,
last
I've
couple
never
of years have
encountered
been very
anything.
rough.
Never encountered anything like that. And I mean, we had some bad ones back east, but bindweed, I heard their roots can go down like 40 feet too. So
And
uh,
how long lived are their seeds?
I
I've
don't
heard
know.
that they're like 50 to 100 years.
Oh, really?
Not to make it more depressing, but
Yeah, yeah, I did go down a little bit of a rabbit hole just with bindweed to see if there were some biological controls, but it's really hard to get your hands on the bindweed mites. I think Colorado has a program, but even if you do introduce the bindweed mites, it takes years and years for them to take effect.
really,
Mhm.
wow. Um, Are Nathan's asking if you're willing to share the slide deck in a PDF format with the group?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Happy to.
Maybe that's something we can figure out and make available on the Plant Society website. We can chat about that and make sure it happens.
Great.
Um, Lots of questions here. Elaine's asking, how does your nursery cater to the specialized needs of plant species that might be adapted to certain microclimates or and slash hyper local habitats?
Ooh, yeah, interesting question. As we go forward, and we get into production with less common species, we do want to get into these niche species. So sometimes that will take a different approach, as opposed to this 3 to 5 distinct wild populations outcrossing. If you have something that's so niche, uh, we would just amplify one population, for example. Um, just really careful about inbreeding depression and, thinking through it really carefully before you go into production. But yeah, we definitely want to offer more, like, I guess they would be called, yeah, niche species.
Um, and is there a timeline for restoration post flood damage in Yellowstone Park? Valerie is asking.
They're kind of ready for it. It's been, I guess, a little over 2 years since the floods, and they're doing. They have some construction that's been completed with their road work, and they're ready to seed. We're also producing plugs for them of different species. I think we have 4 for planned for 2025. So they're going to do some live plant install in the fall, as well as seed-based restoration. And they're trying to get their nursery up online. I think it's called Stevens Creek Nursery. So I've been in talks with the new nursery manager there, and she's excited to do their own production as well.
Awesome. A comment from Susie. Thanks so much. I'd love to see development of more volunteer programs, especially around the nursery wildflower production. I'm doing it small scale for myself and would love to learn more. And if we get those slides out, Brian Voigt's email will be in there.
Anyways.
Yeah, great person to reach out to. Um, Gord is asking, I hope I pronounced your name right. How would you compare and contrast your efforts with the Plant Materials Center in Bridger?
Oh yeah, that's really good to mention that. So obviously we have commercial growers and the NRCS plant material centers that are growing quite a diversity of natives already. And the NRCS mission for the past 50 to 100 years, developing some of these cultivars of natives that are selected for certain traits, mostly to enhance or um, contribute to rangeland improvement and grasslands or agricultural use. So they're selected for robustness or ability handle grazing. So that approach is, one side of things, and it can be great for that reason. But ours, the eco-type seed is really for natural areas, and we want to stay as close to those wild genetics as possible. So that's why all of these species are derived from wild populations, because ultimately they will go into a natural setting. And those lines won't be carried on like they do at NRCS. So those genetics are constantly recycled, and we're after the one thing I didn't mention is each plot has a lifespan of sometimes 5 to 7 years, depending on the species. And when that plot starts to go in decline, we till that under and start fresh with new populations. So always bringing in those wild genetics.
Hmm. Um, Another question. Patrick is asking if you would consider LPOT nursery systems to minimize plastic use.
Yes, I've learned a lot about the ELIPOT system.
LPOT.
Yeah, it's a European new technology, relatively new, as opposed to the styroblock that's been dominating the nursery industry for forever. So the ELIPOT is also, from what I understand, more conducive to lateral root growth. So our partner at Trustlands division here at DNRC is experimenting with side-by-side plantings of ELIPOT versus styroblock, see what the survivability is. The technology, it would just require kind of retrofitting our operation and buying completely new machines for the ELIPOT. There are some advantages. As you said, the waste, I'm always thinking about that, because even though we're a green industry, we do produce a lot of waste. One thing about our styroblocs, though, is the Forest Service has a styroblock densifying machine that goes travels to Forest Service nurseries, and it can only operate in the summertime at certain temperatures. But Coeur d'Alene Nursery, our partners there, said next time they have it, they'll send us our way, so we can densify all of our old styroblocks. And interesting little fact is that the material that after it goes through the densifying machine is shipped over to Japan to create picture frames. So little example of globalism.
Wow.
And we try to get as much use out of our styroblocs as possible. Some of them we've had for over 10 years. So we get pretty good usage out of them. I'd have to say, before working in this industry, I really didn't know a good use for styrofoam, but this is it. But yeah, I
Yeah,
want to get into ELIPOTs. If the nursery industry trend goes that direction, we don't want to get behind the trends. So
I'm sure there's a lot of innovation constantly. Um, Bridget is asking, um, as you experiment with collection and propagation techniques, are you sharing results on rngr.net or publishing fact sheets like what NRCS plant materials centers create?
we haven't published, but I mean, that's a good suggestion to have, add to our resources page on our website. Because I always mention, so she mentioned Ringer, rngr.net. It's an amazing resource by the Forest Service. You can look up any North American species on that, and it'll bring up propagation protocols, cultivation. You can select which nursery, their protocols, and it's just amazing. So yeah, more resources the better. I'm happy to share what I have and then add to our website under the seed program section.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Michael, for answering all of these questions. If we still have a lot of people in attendance. If anyone wants to enter any last quandary into the chat. Um, but yeah, what an awesome project, and I really am so impressed with how far in advance all this. I mean, you're really looking down the line as you have to.
Mhm. Yeah, I appreciate the time and I hope to see a lot of you out here next season. So we'll have a lot of opportunities, even if you just want to come take a look.
Awesome. Yeah, is that is the space an area where folks can just drop in? I mean,
Yep. So the nursery is actually Missoula's second most popular dog park, or maybe the first. I don't know. There's so
oh yeah, I've been there.
yeah, you can walk through our trails. They intertwine with our seed production fields. But the seed production fields are all fenced off now, but you can obviously see what's going on in there, and we have some interpretive signage. And we do have plans for a native meadow in field number 1. We seeded that, did a couple seedings in 2020, late 22 into 23, and it's a labor of love to establish a native meadow from what was a cheatgrass invasive mess. So, but eventually that will be accessible to the public to just wander through, and we'll have a mown serpentine path through there.
Awesome. Well, a lot of thanks in the chat are coming through, and yeah, thanks so much, Michael. Really, really great. And yeah, I hope I'm gonna keep in touch and come out there soon. Check it out.
Uh, I can't wait to see the Rocky Mountain Gardens this year.
Oh yeah, they're gonna explode. Everyone's welcome to come to my gardens too. Um, awesome. Well, thanks so much everyone for coming, and we look forward to seeing you in January, if not sooner.
Thanks, everybody.